Good evening. I'm Richard Fowler, an American storyteller and a cable news commentator, and tonight's moderator. My gender pronouns are he, him, and I want to welcome you to this robust and historic conversation with the leaders of the LGBTQIA+ community. During tonight's thought-provoking and landmark conversation, we will both honor the past and make history today. For the first time ever, 3 of the Stonewall-era LGBTQIA+ equity organizations are being led by Black executive directors. And the movement for LGBTQIA+ liberation is mounting a new and unified campaign to advance a more inclusive economic and political society. This movement is being defined and written by people of color who bring their lived experiences, their intersections to work and the fight forward. Civil rights luminary and icon Bayard Rustin, after returning from the World Pacifist Conference hosted in India in 1948, stated, "We need in every community a group of angelic troublemakers. The only weapon we have is our bodies, and we must tuck them into places so the wheels don't turn." And the dynamic folks you will hear from tonight are those angelic troublemakers. All of them have dedicated their minds, their time, their career, and their bodies in the fight for liberty, justice, and equity. Before we begin tonight's historic conversation, here's some housekeeping rules. Closed caption and transcript services are available below through the closed caption button at the bottom of the screen. In addition, this conversation is being recorded and will be available on demand next week on the National Center for Lesbian Rights website. With the housekeeping out of the way, let's get the conversation going. Today, the United States House of Representatives passed the Equality Act, a piece of legislation that would provide consistent and explicit non-discrimination protection for the LGBTQIA+ community. And what this means is it will protect their entire life, including employment, housing, credit, education, public spaces, services, and federally funded programs and jury service. The legislation will be monumental, to say the least. To talk more about the pending bill and the fight ahead, please join me in welcoming my good friend and the Executive Director for the Human Rights Campaign, Alphonso David. Alphonso, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. As you can see, I'm on a train. It's been quite a day. It's been a monumental day, actually. And we were able to get the Equality Act through the House of Representatives. One of the most important things that we fight for is to ensure that we have the ability to thrive. And unfortunately, 2/3 of LGBTQ people in this country say that they face discrimination in their lives. 2/3. Discrimination in housing, in employment, in public accommodations, in credit, in education. And the Equality Act changes that. The Equality Act will ensure that LGBTQ people do not face discrimination, and if they do, they will have recourse under federal law. In addition, most people don't know this, but it's important to highlight. The Equality Act would also provide protections to people of color. And what I mean by that is, for example, retail stores. If you go into a retail store as a person of color, you could face discrimination and there is no protection under federal law. Same if you went into a transportation hub, an Uber or a Lyft. You could face discrimination as an LGBTQ person and there is no protection under federal law. So this legislation is landmark. It will provide key legal protections to LGBTQ people. And today, we overcame the first significant hurdle. It passed the House of Representatives. But now we have to make sure that we mobilize, engage with our elected officials so that it can pass the US Senate.
Thanks for that, Alfonso. So a couple questions for you, because I think as folks who are watching this evening are probably well aware, the Democratic majorities in the Senate are razor thin. And so what is the likelihood of it passing the Senate, and what can folks watching tonight do to ensure its passage in the United States Senate?
I'm going to take this off just for a minute so you can hear me, because
Sure.
I suspect that you couldn't. Um, we need to make sure that we actively engage with members of the Senate. There is so much misinformation out there about what this bill does. And right now, we don't have a clear indication as to which members of the Republican conference will vote for this bill. But remember, when bills are introduced in Congress or in state legislatures, we don't always know where the votes will come from. I am privileged to have drafted the marriage equality law in New York. When we introduced that bill, we didn't have the votes to pass it. And within a few months, we were able to pass that bill successfully. But we will not be able to pass that bill unless people actively engage, unless we mobilize, unless we understand the true implications of this legislation. And that's why we're working in coalition with all of the organizations that are on this call. We're working in coalition with them sure that we can mobilize our community, that people understand the true impact of this legislation.
And speaking about the impact of it, and you talked about misinformation, which I think is such a critical point here. There's been a lot of misinformation put out about the Equality Act, how it will destroy business, how it will hurt communities. Can you clear some of that up? Will the Equality Act destroy business? Will it hurt communities?
I'll answer that question. Decided to pass the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Did it destroy businesses? When we protect people with disabilities from discrimination, did it destroy businesses? So this idea that providing legal civil rights and protections to people of color, LGBTQ people, and women will destroy businesses is just a false trope. And we know this. We know these arguments were used in the past where restaurants, barbershops, places of public accommodations would say, I don't want to provide services to people of color, to interracial couples, right? Or I would like to express my objection based on my religion. I don't want to provide these services. That is nothing more than a false trope. And we have to fight back with the facts. We have to make sure they understand. If I, as a Black man, can walk into a bodega or into a restaurant and I cannot be turned away because of my race, why should I be turned away because of my sexual orientation? What we're effectively doing by not passing the Equality Act is ignoring discrimination or potentially acquiescing when we see what's happening to our siblings all over the country.
So well put, Alphonso. And as the fight continues, and as folks are watching this evening, and if they want to engage, what's the best way? How can they help the Human Rights Campaign and other groups fighting for for the Equality Act's passage? Is it calling their senator? Is it writing a letter? Is it calling the White House switchboard? What do folks need to be doing to be engaged and active in the next step of this bill's passage?
I would say there are a number of things people can do. If you don't know who your senator is, please look up your senator online and contact your senator and remind them that this bill is important to you, that this bill is important to your friends, bill is important to your family members. Make sure they understand that they need to support this bill. That's first. Second, all of our organizations, from the National Black Justice Coalition to the Task Force to NCLR, all of our to GLSEN, we all have websites that you can go support our organizations to get this work done, and also make sure that hold those elected officials accountable who have not voted for this bill.
Well, Alphonso, David, we want to thank you so much for joining us. We know that you have a busy schedule, and we hope you have safe travels to wherever you're headed, sir. Thank you so much for being with us this evening.
Thank you so much for having me, and apologize that I'm on a train. Thank you again.
Listen, I get it. The work continues. And now I want to turn to our illustrious panel that will be continuing the conversation, not only about the Equality Act, but about the continued movement for liberty, justice, and equality for the LGBTQIA+ community. So please join me in welcoming these amazing folks that I'm so happy to share the virtual stage with. Imani Rupert-Gordon, the Executive Director of the National Council for Lesbian Rights. Kierra Johnson, the Executive Director for the National LGBTQ Task Force. Dominique Morgan, the Executive Director for Black and Pink. David Johns, the Executive Director for the National Black Justice Coalition, and Melanie Willingham-Jaggers, the Interim Executive Director for GLSEN. That's a lot of executive directors. I love it. And they're all Black, makes it even better. Happy Black History Month. So let's begin the conversation, because all of you guys are doing such dope and dynamic work across the movement. And so before we get into how all the work intersects, I want to know the work that you're actually doing and who you are. So let's start with Dominique. First, tell us about yourself, how you came to the work, and what is the work that's happening at Black and Pink?
Well, hi, Richard. I will second that voice is giving us all a moment on this evening. I am Dominique Morgan. I am the Executive Director of Black and Pink National. We're the largest organization in the country looking at the needs of LGBTQ plus folks, folks who identify as living with HIV and AIDS who have been system impacted. We're also an abolitionist agency. I've been the ED of Black and Pink for 3 years. I came to this work reluctantly. I did not start off in the agency as middle management. I did not desire to want to be an executive director. It really was by the universe. I turned down the job and said, I will join the board of directors, read the rules and bylaws, my darlings, because it was like, if there's not an ED, the president of the board becomes the interim director. And I said, I can do this after a while. I'm a Black trans woman who's born and raised in Omaha, Nebraska, formerly incarcerated nearly a decade in the adult prison system, 18 months in solitary confinement under the Prison Rape Elimination Act. 6 of those months, I actually lived on death row here in Nebraska. And so there's a lived experience component to my work, but also I've been a sexual health educator. I've been in the streets working with our people for the last decade. And so I've been able to pull all of those perspectives together to do the work we do at Black and Pink. Ultimately, we want people to have access to liberation, to spaces where they can thrive based on what their definition of thriving is. And that's been our ultimate goal. How can we dismantle and remove barriers? So I'm super, super, super excited to be here with all of these beautiful, incredible Black faces. And thank you.
Thank you, Dominique. Let's talk to David Johns at the National Black Justice Coalition. So David, I know some of your history because you are a friend and someone I've known for quite some time. So you started on Capitol Hill and then you worked with the Obama administration, and now you're in advocacy. So I think the question becomes, one, tell folks your story, but two, how did you get to advocacy, and what's some of the work that's happening at NBJC?
Yep, I appreciate that. I want to say thank you to Imani for setting the table, facilitating all of us being here in honor of Black History Month, which we celebrate every day of every year. Anyone who knows me knows that I care greatly about children, and that's in part because I got my start teaching kindergarten and 3rd grade, and watching systemic injustices impact children who did not ask to be born, and who sociologist Asa Hilliard says are all geniuses. And he reminds us that there's no secret to supporting them. We first acknowledge them as human, and we second support them with love. But through my own lived experience as a Black same gender loving man, I use same gender loving, not gay, because gay evokes stigma and deviance and people thinking about sex and perversion. I much prefer to center love, which is much closer to all of our attempts to get free. And the short of it is that watching my babies be impacted by the decisions that adults made or did not make led me to take a pay cut from my job teaching elementary school to pursue a fellowship in Washington, D.C., to really learn how that schoolhouse rock suggesting that a bill becomes a law actually happens. And I spent nearly a decade as the only Black man in the U.S. Senate working on the Health Committee, which sees nearly 40% of legislation introduced in any given Congress, and thereafter had the opportunity to take the experience crafting policy to implementing it, working for still my president, Barack Hussein Obama, and one of the smartest women that I've ever encountered, Michelle Yvonne Robinson Obama. And it was in that capacity that we produced the first ever White House Summit for African-American LGBTQIA+ youth, one of the most difficult and yet rewarding experiences of my life, that allowed me to understand the importance of representational leadership. It really compelled me to take on the opportunity to quarterback the team at NBJC which is the only national civil rights organization at the intersections of racial equity and LGBTQIA plus equality. And our work remains unchanged. We advocate for the freedom of members of our community who are often neglected and ignored. We focus on federal public policy, so very much focused on the Equality Act, also celebrate the introduction of Rep. Lee's HR 40, the reparations bill, HCON 100, Rep. Jackson Lee's bill about reparations as well, and related efforts to ensure that all members of our community get free. We focus on health and wellness, so not only HIV and AIDS, which continues to disproportionately impact our community, but also mental health and wellness, acknowledging that we often exist facing the impact of trauma and toxic stress, and that has been compounded when we think about all of the crises that we're experiencing now. And last but not least, and it should be no surprise as we focus on ensuring that all of our babies can thrive. So the legacy of that summit that I mentioned, which happened 5 years ago, is still alive and well. It shows up in our Youth and Young Adult Action Council, and in the work that they're doing with organizations like Cartoon Network, creating comic strips where they're helping people understand the importance of gender pronouns and not making assumptions that might otherwise inflict violence upon people who are perfect just as they are. So we're busy fighting to make sure that we can all be free.
Thank you, David. Now, I want to second how you started your comments by thanking Imani and the National Center for Lesbian Rights for spearheading this conversation this evening. Me and Imani spent a lot of time on the phone planning out and sort of sketching out how we got to here. So I want to turn to you next, Imani, and sort of ask you about, one, how you got to this work, and also describe some of the work of the National Center for Lesbian Rights.
So happy to do that. Richard, thank you so much for agreeing to be our moderator today. And thank you so much to the amazing panelists. This certainly was not all the National Center for Lesbian Rights. All of these amazing folks have put in so much work putting this together. And so I want to thank you for having this, and happy Black History Month, y'all. It's lovely to be here. I started doing this work. I grew up as a young person who didn't always see myself represented. And so I always thought about how I could change that. And when I was young, I thought I wanted to write for television because creating characters would be the way to show difference. And when I was older, I started a conference called the Social Fiction Conference that talked about social justice through science fiction, gaming, and fantasy. This idea that we could talk about other people in other worlds and then apply these real life concepts. And then I realized it didn't have to be something else. We could actually just do the work in real life, and that would get it done. And I went to graduate school, and I became a social worker, and I started working at the Broadway Youth Center. I was the director of the Broadway Youth Center in Chicago. Served LGBTQ youth experiencing homelessness and housing instability. Forever changed the way that I think about work and the ways that I do work, how I think about experts in the field, and how valuable it is to have someone with a lived experience, how much that changes everything. After that, I became the executive director for Affinity Community Services in Chicago, serving Black LGBTQ women, and that Affinity is my heart. I love being there. And NCLR, I have been a longtime fan and supporter of NCLR. The previous executive director was just a mentor and a friend of mine. And I'm just honestly just happy to be here. And the thing is, at NCLR, we work to achieve civil and human rights for all LGBTQ people and our families. And we are a legal organization, but we do whatever it takes to get to equality for LGBTQ people. And so we're known primarily for impact litigation, but that's not the only work we do. We do legislation, public policy, public education, because it takes a lot of ways to get there. And a legal solution is not always the solution that we're looking for. I think that's important. I said earlier that I'm a social worker leading a legal organization. And I know that sounds a bit odd to some people, but we have to think about, I was trained as an activist. That's where I come from. That's where I was trained. That's where I grew up. And the fights that start in the streets are the ones that end in the courts. Folks are out disrupting traffic because we are looking for structural change. And I think that there's a very real correlation there. When we say that this work is different, I very much disagree with that. It's not different. It's always been the same. We've always worked for the same goal, and I'm thrilled to be there. NCLR our work is to serve the most underrepresented in our groups. We were started when a group of lesbians didn't see themselves or their needs represented in the larger LGBTQ movement or in the women's rights movement. And now when we look at our work, we are there to fill gaps. That is what is that's in our DNA. That is what we are created to do. And that's what we do. So we find more ways to include more folks. And we try to be as inclusive as possible and always push ourselves to be more inclusive. Right now, some of the work that we're working on is obviously getting the Equality Act passed. That's something that's really important, will affect LGBTQ people, people of color, people from intersectional identities, low income folks. That's something that's really important. But we also looked at folks from lived experience. Doing anti-poverty work is a really important part of the work that we do. Working to end conversion therapy is some really important we do. Making sure that everyone can play sports is important work that we do. You know, making sure that everyone in our community has all the rights that they can. That is the work that we do. And so, y'all, I'm thrilled to be here, thrilled to be on this panel with these amazing, brilliant Black folks.
That was amazing, right? And you know, I think what's so interesting about all the groups assembled tonight is that your work is so vast. You might be known for one thing, but the work goes far beyond that, which brings me to the next person that I want to ask to introduce himself, which is Kierra Johnson. Because while the task force's work is so vast, they're known for creating change. Everybody remembers their first creating change experience. I remember mine. But the task force's work is, the LGBTQ task force's work is so vast and so wide. And so I want first for you to tell us how you came to the work, but also some of the work that the task force is doing that folks don't know about.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much. I, like some of the other panelists and many folks I find in executive director positions, we kind of fell into it accidentally and stepped into it with a want to create better circumstances, situations, lived experiences for our communities, with an S, all of our communities. I came into this movement from the reproductive health, rights, and justice field. So I was doing sex education. I was a sex educator for a while with high school students. I've got stories for you, maybe over drinks another time. Abortion access work, and I spent 20 years of my life doing that, and always saw and engaged in movement building work that included working with folks and organizations in the LGBTQ movement, but also in civil rights and racial justice and immigrant rights, and so forth. And so I you know, I'd always been a fan, Imani, when you said that. I was always a fan of NCLR. I was always a fan of the task force, right? Like, I was just appreciative and in awe of like so many brilliant people working at the intersections toward LGBTQ liberation and equality. And I was like, that's what I want to do. And it wasn't a hard leap, right? It wasn't a far leap. I mean, there's so much about these movements where that have foundational values of bodily autonomy and self-determination. And you know, that's kind of what brought me. That was the bridge that brought me into LGBTQ work. As a Black woman who's bisexual and a parent and from Georgia. I have become very clear that ownership of bodies, right, is where the fight is. And it is true, right? Like, who owns bodies controls power. And we've seen that exercised in ways that have not benefited us throughout history, right? From the stealing of the U.S., right, that was owned and lived on, appreciated, worked by Indigenous people, to slavery, right, to how women's bodies have been owned for sex for someone else and pleasure for someone else and baby making for someone else's benefit. It's not new, right? And so the work that we're doing is ultimately about how we own our own bodies and take our own power back. And that's what keeps me engaged to this day in this work. Some of the work we're doing, it falls in three categories: faith, equity, and democracy. Our faith work, we take very seriously that people who care about these issues, many of them also have a faith community that they are a part of. They identify maybe as spiritual people, if not religious. And they want to be able to do this work in the name of their religion, not despite their religion, right? And so we've been doing that work of engaging with faith leaders and helping them figure out the frames and the messages for how to talk to their congregations or their faith communities, and engaging them in political and advocacy work. In our equity portfolio, one of our biggest focuses is around, we've got a sex ed fellowship that is geared towards centering LGBTQ young people, and also reproductive justice work and abortion access. And then finally, in our democracy, there's so much to do as it relates to democracy work right now, right? We've got a lot of rebuilding, reimagining, strengthening of our democracy. We have done census work, had a successful Queering the Census campaign, entered into voter education, registration, and GOTV. And we're actually thinking about, whether or not we're going to engage in some redistricting work. So stay tuned to that. But voting rights, restoration of voting rights for returning citizens is something that I care deeply about. And the task force did some work with the Second Chances campaign in Florida. And it's work that I'm so proud of and want to replicate and want to be a support to that work in some other states. So Dominique, we need to rub elbows and figure out how we might be able to do some things.
Thank you so much, Kierra. And I think you brought up something so interesting when you talked about education, because one thing that I know to be true is that hate, bigotry, discrimination, those are things that are taught, right? It's not, you don't wake up racist or homophobic, you're taught these things. So to focus on that, I want to bring in Melanie to the conversation, who works for GLSEN, an organization that focuses on young people directly. Melanie, welcome to the conversation. Tell us about yourself and how you got to the work, and also tell us about the amazing work of GLSEN.
Sure thing. So my name is Melanie Willingham-Jaggers. I use she and they pronouns. A little bit about me. I am Ruby May's 18th grandchild. I am Sandra's only daughter, favorite, but definitely only. Also, I'm Julia's partner. I am a friend to many folks, and I just deeply appreciate both Imani and everyone else on this panel for pulling this conversation together. I'm new to this game. I'm new to the executive director game, and I absolutely see you all as mentors and siblings and comrades in this work. And so I learn from you each every day, even if you don't know that I'm looking and learning. So I appreciate being here. So I come to this work through youth development work and through coalition work and transformative organizing, culturally based transformative organizing. And the big gist of that is that the people who are most impacted by the systems at work in their lives have the closest understanding of what liberation, what freedom, and what success looks like, right? So why don't we ask them? Why don't we pull folks into that table? And it's not good. It's not a good enough reason to not do that because folks are inconvenient, or we are loud, or we are not how leaders have looked before. And so, what animates my work and the people who taught me this work are really the folks who have experienced these systems, whether it's incarceration, whether it's street economy, whether it's sex work or gang affiliation. It's like our people are our people, and we are always here, and all of us deserve everything it takes for us to thrive and live with dignity. So that's who has brought me to this work, and that's what I come to this work with. I've organized coalitions here in New York City. I've worked with homeless and runaway young people, LGBTQ young people who are homeless because they came out to their families and their families said, get out, right? So I come to this work with a deep connection to young people. I'm less young every day. I feel it, I look it, but I am here for the babies and here at GLSEN. And part of the thing that is super inspiring about the work we do at GLSEN is that not only have we been at this work, at this table, looking to ensure the educational civil rights of every LGBTQ plus young person, right, real or perceived queer status in our education system, What we have now done is sharpen our understanding that actually our education system must reach racial, gender, and disability justice outcomes, period, right? We know that safety and inclusion is really important. We also know that justice outcomes are fundamental to this being a system that serves all of our young people. I would also say that part of our work is setting the North Star, right? Setting our North Star for what our education system can and should be, right? It should be a place that is liberated. It should be a place that is liberating, right? It should be a place that is free from harm, and that what it takes for every single student to thrive and to grow into their biggest and their realest self is the baseline. That's what our education system ought to be, and that's what we're fighting at GLSEN to make it. And I would be remiss to say that my sister friend and my board member is also here, Dominique. So there is a way in which GLSEN is everywhere, and we are in an expansive moment that is really about reclaiming what it means to be an education civil rights organization, that it understands that the crisis of our education system is playing out on Black bodies, right? Playing out on queer children, and that is both unacceptable, but it's also our system, and we're going to make this system serve our people.
Amen to that. Which brings me to the next question, which I want you to take up, Imani, is that for the first time in history, the 3 Stonewall organizations are led by executive directors of color. And beyond that, many of the organizations that focus on LGBTQIA+ advocacy are under the direction of Black people. 1, why is this? And 2, how can we as Black LGBTQIA+ people of color take advantage of this moment to move ourselves forward and liberate ourselves, while we know we have allies and friends and advocates sitting in all of these executive director chairs as we see assembled on this stage?
I love that. Thank you so much for the question. And that's a fantastic question. It's important to acknowledge that this is a change. This is something that's different. When I stepped into this role a year ago, not everyone on this panel was leading their organization. And so I do want to mention 2 things. One, why that is, but then why it's also important. So to start with, obviously, this increase in leadership is a direct result of the reckoning around race, especially in the LGBTQ community that we're seeing in this country. And I believe that having Black leadership in multiple LGBTQ organizations is a big part of this. And it's something that we absolutely need to have. Long before I was a student of racial justice, I was someone that experienced racism and sexism and heterosexism simultaneously. And so the perspective that informs the way that I do my work, it comes from that, not from any sort of formal education that I had. And so this needs to include more of us. And I think this is a really important time for this right now. And it's undeniable that the reason this has happened is because we've had a year of civil unrest, and it's been sparked by the unfair treatment of Black people by police, that we're dealing with the ramifications of a global pandemic and how it disproportionately impacts all of our folks, especially all underrepresented folks. We had an unpeaceful transfer of power. All of these things are just like changing what's actually necessary and having these important conversations and recognizing that this has never happened before. And this is something that does need to change. But I want to go on record as saying that this isn't enough and it's not even close because, and I'll say this again, we can't mistake presence for power, and we do that too often. Representation is important, but it's not the goal. The goal isn't to be represented. The goal is to get to a place where representation isn't a miracle. The goal is for little Black girls and young people of color and LGBTQ people and low-income people, people with disabilities, when we can all see ourselves in the highest forms of government, when we can see ourselves with complex storylines in the television shows that we watch. We need to see ourselves as teachers and as professors and as coaches. Representation is where we start. It's not where we finish. And so this is the first time, when we think about representation, it's often the very first way that someone can see or hear or feel a shared experience and understand that this could be something that works for me. This could be me. And I think that's something that's incredibly important because when solutions have never been presented by people that look like us, that share our experience, it's hard for us to see that could be something that would support us. And that continues to hurt the most underrepresented the most underrepresented of us. So representation, it gives us a perspective. It gives us a place to start from, and we need that more than ever. And then also, I just want to say too, that it's too common that people believe that because the our organizations are led by people of color, that our movement can't be racist or that organizations can't be racist. And that's not true. Sometimes folks think that because if we experience racism that we would be less likely to, or we experience some sort of oppression as LGBTQ folks, that we're less likely to experience racism and sexism and transphobia or commit these things, but that's not true. And that's also not how oppression works. We experience oppression and sexism, ableism, transphobia. We experience all of these things in the LGBTQ community. And so we have to keep this in mind, that when we're working to get better, we are working to get better. This wasn't working for a lot of us. And so we're not trying to get back to something, we're trying to create something that we have never seen before. And that's really, really important right now.
I love that we're focusing on something new. So Dominique, to you, because I think that's it, right? As you guys sort of take on the work that you guys do every day, it's about creating a new society, creating something new. And so when you think about that, how do we move those folks who are sticks in the mud, right? And those folks who refuse to make change, and those folks who who sort of dug in on their positions, how do we move them so we can actually create something new where everybody is treated equally and everybody is seen, as MLK would put it, by the content of their character and not how they show up in rooms?
Well, I think we need to do the work so as an abolitionist and also a person who I usually come to my own ideas, not from a traditional lens. And so I'm really comfortable with thinking about, like, this is where we want to get this person to, and this route we've tried isn't working. Well, what else can work? And I think at the heart of it is that people believe that if we have access to this cumulative experience around liberation and joy, that they'll have to train in their individualized definition of it. That they will have to, whatever is in their basket that they've picked up, that they've collected, y'all want me to turn all that in and put it in a big bucket, and then everybody's going to share from that. Like, that's what people are crying about when we're talking about stimulus packages and so on and so forth. Sometimes it's the most oppressed people who think, I don't want anyone to get a piece of my dollar, because we live from a deficit. And I think as Black folks, one of the impacts for white supremacy on my body was this idea that for me to pick up something, I had to put something down. And that also was a truth when it came to me and another Black person having success. And I remember when Imani got in that position, and we were at Creating Change last year, and I was just like, yes, okay, this is a thing. I remember when Kierra was placed as deputy director in Detroit, and we almost died because everything was iced over, and y'all messed up me going to the Brandy concert. I remember that, sis. It's like I'm watching Melanie's process, and the beautiful thing is that I don't feel like I have to sacrifice Dominique's ascension to whatever my personal purpose is for us all to have this group experience. So I'm not going to say that's the first step. I think that's what we need to take time to do, is that they have spent generations telling us it's one or the other. We have spent generations being told that you only get what you work for. The more you work, the more that you can marginalize folks who don't work as hard as you do, so on and so forth. And so, yeah, divest from that. And I personally believe, from a space of abolition and cumulative joy, it's best for people to have an independent definition, because we've all come to the room, right? And in Zoom 2020 and Zoom 2021, you get there, and even in this Clubhouse foolishness, where you get a whole bunch of people in the room, and you recognize quickly that folks do not have any idea of what the heck they're talking about, but they want to have a group conversation. I think it's really difficult to have a group conversation if you haven't had personal conversations with yourself. And so I think the independent definition, independent experience of liberation is essential, but we have to train folks to not let that be your limit. Okay, you have your things, what's next? And that there's beauty in that, and that your things expand. My experience of being executive director, what I have access to, who I am, what I get to implement is stronger because there's more of us. When we can, from a monetary perspective of, well, you can't tell me that Dominique is only supposed to make this as an ED because, honey, I know what Melanie is making over here at GLSEN, honey, and so I need a piece of that. Right? Like these things that are really important, the more of us, so your independent experience gets to expand and it gets to glow in a more beautiful way. But we get this cumulative experience. So then those of us who have experienced leadership as a Black person, the folks who are like our haters, they're jealous because they haven't been able to touch their thing. It's hard to tell someone about your dream or get them to invest in your dream if they've never seen a dream of theirs come to fruition. So it's all reciprocal. Your individual experience, this cumulative experience, the folks who have never had that are poo-pooing on yours will finally have, and then they'll be excited about yours and you're excited about theirs. And that's what we need. And I think it takes more spaces like this. I think it takes more opportunities for us to be connected on a personal level. Because Alphonso, like, he left the call too quickly, but I'm like, if my Facebook invite sits for another 3 months, I'm pulling up to his office the next time I'm in DC, which will be in a couple of weeks. Like, we need real, actual connections. I need to really say, I know you. You know what I'm saying? I really need to be able to say that because the more I know you, the more that I can show up for you, the more when opportunities come across my table, they can be refined for you because I understand what speaks to you. And if we're just being honest, I'm more excited to celebrate you because there's this kind of surface level love and appreciation, but then it hits another level when it's just like, yo, like every piece of success you get like brings me to tears and brings me joy. And there's a deeper connection that's necessary for that. And I think those moments are necessary. And then all the things I talked about before will be possible.
Listen, Dominique, whatever your version of liberation you're selling, I'm buying. But sadly, there's folks on Capitol Hill and in capitals all across the country that aren't buying that, right? When it comes to how laws are written and how policies are created for LGBTQIA+ folks, especially those that are people of color. So David, how do we take what Dominique is selling and transport that into the minds of these lawmakers as they craft these laws that leave a lot of us outside of it?
I don't want to do that. I want to stay in the space that Dominique directed us to go in, which is to not play their game. And I want to honor that we've seen that work, right? Like, we got to the place of having the thin margin in the Senate as a result of people being tired of the white supremacy that often reared its head in Georgia. The organizing of Black women. Every time I say Black women, I mean cis and trans, so we're clear. And the unyielding efforts of often Black, queer, trans, non-binary folk who live in the trenches and who are often organizing to overcome the selfishness of and commitment that elected and appointed leaders have to whatever forms of supremacy make them feel better and or otherwise profit from other people's pain. And so I'm much more invested in electing people who represent us. Again, acknowledging not all my kinfolk are my kinfolk. It's not about just representation, as Imani said, but about folks who demonstrate a commitment to our issues, our communities, our needs. I'd much rather hold senators who choose in this moment to not respond to not only the 2/3 of us who have reported experiences of discrimination, bias, or hate crime, which is likely an underrepresentation given the fact that we don't run to the feds. But couple that with the fact that more than 70% of Americans surveyed, and I've never been surveyed, so again, likely an underreporting, 70% of Americans report supporting the Equality Act. Those senators who choose this moment to not do the job of the people should be held accountable and escorted out of the building the next time that there's an opportunity for us to vote for them. And so my answer to the question is, I don't want to continue to do that, which has always been done. We have seen and experienced the results of that. I would much rather lean into the ability to hack new solutions based on opportunities that are available to us given all of the crises that we're experiencing. I'd much rather leverage the brilliance of Octavia Butler and Audre Lorde and Barbara Jordan and John Roberts Lewis, who is not as queer in the way that the previous people I referenced were, but was intentional in being a good troublemaker and naming the need for those efforts to be radically inclusive. I'd much rather sit in dreaming about our freedom in the ways that everybody has described and running our own plays than trying to convince white supremacists to give up the sign systems and symbols that allow them to enjoy white privilege.
Fair. Now, Kierra, how do we begin? Like, what do some of those dreams look like? How do we turn that dream into action?
You know, it's connected to your last question too. I think part of how we get to liberation is being our authentic and true selves, right? Like I think so much about that term code switching, right? That so many of us are familiar with, right? We know how to be in this space and switch it off and be this in this space. And I feel like it, you know, in particular, you know, I didn't graduate from undergrad, right? And I entered into a movement that was overwhelmingly white led, right? The leadership was white. The messengers were white. The funders were white. And I found myself getting into this space of I needed to morph myself into something that resembled more, right, of what they were to make it, right? I found myself, you know, not saying certain things or being certain ways or moving my body in certain ways or, and that doesn't work for us, right? Like we've got to your point, Dominique, like, you've got to recognize your own personal liberation, right? And we're all going through that, and it looks different for each of us. But until we have some realization about what the barriers are, what the bars are, what the chains are, and you know, begin to like, you know, work those open and work that stuff through, we're not going to be able to get right to the dreams, right? When I think about the dreams, I think about, you know, we live in a time where, you know, we expand civil protection for all the queer people, right? A dream is violence against trans women is eradicated, right? The vision is we do away with this false idea that somehow you can give or enjoy partial equity, right? Like, you know, there's no partially equal, right? And there's no being grateful for partial equality. You know, you're partially protected, you're partially safe, you're partially free. There's no partially free. You're either free or you're not free. And the more of us that are in these positions of power, right? And I don't just mean positional power, right? I mean community power, collective power, individual power, money power, right? Like all of these elected power. We've got to continue to break open and create new space, right? It is very science fiction and very Octavia Butler, right? Like we've got to continue to create and knit new space, right? New form to allow for more, you know, of us to be our authentic selves. Representation, right, does matter, but I can't be every Black person. I can't be every woman. I can't be every queer. They're two, right? That's just not possible. And that's a recipe for failure and beating myself up, right, for not being enough. No, thank you. I want to create all the space so that folks can, right, be and share their experiences to get at, I think, some of these legislators. And like David said, we've seen that work. Georgia didn't become blue because we did the same damn thing. That's not what happened. It was a whole bunch of like women of color, Black folks, you know, Deep South people who, you know, even the folks on our progressive side love to, you know, get down about, you know, we talk about Southerners in not so good ways. I'm a Georgia girl. So, but it was being authentically Southern. It was being proud of being a Georgian. It was about being all of their Blackness. It was about being authentically engaged with people who had similar, right, needs, wants, dreams, and it was just done. It's done differently. Movement for Black Lives did it differently. The activists who shut that pipeline down, they did it differently. The dreamers who were out here like, I am undocumented and I'm putting my life on the line, they did it differently. And so we have to keep doing it differently at whatever different and authentic is to us, and it will continue to change hearts and minds. Electeds are human like the rest of us, and their hearts and minds are movable. I have to believe that. We've seen it happen, and I think we will continue to see it happen.
I think that's absolutely right. And when you talk about hearts and minds, I want to go to you, Melanie, right? Because the moldable hearts and minds are the minds of our children. And the work of GLSEN focuses on molding those hearts and minds, especially to create safe places in our public schools and our private ones. How do we begin to sort of change the hearts and minds, and what is the work that we can be doing to ensure that the generation coming behind us, they start liberated, right? Because I think as Kierra pointed out, we're trying to find liberation. We're trying to find where the boxes are. How do we make sure that the little ones don't have to find the box? They're like, we don't live in the box, we live outside of it.
Yeah. That's a great question. I mean, here's the thing. I'm going to disagree. I think that this round people have been disagreeing with you, so I'm going to jump on that. I'm going to disagree with the idea. So so I think that we actually, so hearts and minds, yes. I think we like connect as people. There's moving, and there's organizing, and there's transformative relationships. And also there's policy. There are rules, right? So what I want to make sure every young kid that goes into any K-12 learning environment has is protection. I want to make sure that all the people around them have the rules of the road. They understand the guardrails. They know that you can't just partially discriminate. You can't not discriminate against this person because of X, Y, Z. Like, we just can't do it. And then we go hearts and minds, right? Because, you know, just to go a little bit Professor Mel on you for a second, right? Ibram Kendi would talk about racist policies precede racist ideas, right? So it's not that we have to change hearts and minds to get different policy. We have to change policy to not begin the hearts and minds going down the road of oppression, white supremacy, et cetera, extraction. So I don't mean to, so anyway, I think that there's a level of, we don't have to start at hearts and minds. We include that because we are a democracy, we are a society, we are a nation of people. And we know that we can only get so far when we are afraid of each other, when we are blocking each other off, when we are afraid of or competing against each other for the crumbs that are falling off the table, at which we all deserve a seat, all of us, right? Not some of us. So I would say that part of our approach at GLSEN is thinking about what are the policies that need to be in place to ensure safety and inclusion. What are the materials that those in the classroom who care about these babies can have that are grade appropriate, culturally appropriate, deeply inclusive, can represent every single young person, that they can not only see themselves reflected in the curriculum, but see a window into someone else's life through the curriculum, through what we are requiring them to learn, right? We require these children to be in our public education system. The final thing I'll say on this is that GLSEN strives to be a bridge, right? Like, there are people who are high will and low skill, right? They like want to be with us, but like the best they can do right now is smile and nod. They have no way of knowing how to get there. And part of the role we see as our job at GLSEN is to be the bridge, right? Is to help folks come along when their hearts and their minds are in the right place. Come along, let us help you understand how to be in relationship, and right relationship, and mutually accountable relationship, and in transformative relationship with folks all over the country. Right? GLSEN has over 40 chapters in over 40 states. These are folks in the suburbs, these are folks in rural parts of our country, these are folks in cities who care about making schools safe for queer kids. That's beautiful, right? And our job at GLSEN is to figure out how to help their hearts and minds, right, be more effective, more deeply grounded, more connected, and more safe as they go out and take this action for these young people. So I'll pause there, but there's lots to say.
And I'm going to stay with you for the final question. So I began this panel by quoting Bayard Rustin, where he talks about being an angelic troublemaker. And there are a lot of angelic troublemakers who are tuning in tonight from various communities. And from your perch as an executive director, Melanie, what's a piece of advice you have for the angelic troublemakers that are watching this evening?
Ooh, what would I say? Let's see. I mean, I think that, well, damn, now I really got to say something off the cuff. Okay, all right. Angelic troublemakers, what are we doing? Listen, I think that there is liberation enough for us all, and there is work for us all to do, and that we get more free when we get there together. My homie, my ace, Alicia Garza, says, you know, our work is to put more power in the hands of more people. And that's what we do. And in our various perches and our different organizations with our different kind of foci on different communities, that's what we do. We work to get more power in the hands of more people. And so I think that, you know, part of what we have to do is be in deep, meaningful, mutually accountable relationship with one another. What that means is that we do the work together. What that means is that we sharpen one another. What that means is that we disagree and we build a new future and sharper ideas and better options for us all. That's what that means. And so I would encourage all of the angelic troublemakers out there to like get a friend and then get your friend to get a friend, right? And that we do this work together and that you find your people, you support them, and you connect to the work. And we are just a few of the good folks out there. We're just a few of the Black queers out there doing amazing stuff. Find some more because there are brilliant folks everywhere. And it's the people who have been most marginalized, who have a clearest understanding of what liberation feels like. And so find them and listen to them. Get used to listening to queer people. Get used to listening to trans women and trans men. Get used to listening to Black people. Get used to it because that's the road to freedom. Right? We are multiracial. The potential of our society is so deep and so rich. The multiracial nature of who we are as a LGBTQ plus movement is amazing. And we know that this country is particularly built on a specific kind of anti-Blackness and a specific kind of white supremacy. So let us be multiracial, let us be a rainbow coalition, but listen to Black people. Because it's through our vision, listen to Indigenous people, because it's through our vision that we get to liberation for us all.
Thank you. Dominique, your advice for the angelic troublemakers watching in tonight.
My advice is know why you want to start trouble. I think that what I see so many times and what leads to the space where people are unhappy and therefore they want other folks to be unhappy or they can't really see this unified vision is that they're just doing the thing they saw someone else do. And last summer, I think, you know, my biggest concern is that we were going to have all of these folks who were like, I'm going to be an activist. And then 2021 was going to come. They got a new administration, all these things. And then these folks were going to be like, okay, I'm done with that. This is my new thing. And like, why are you here? Because there are days when we have worked, you know, 16 hours and it doesn't matter what the check is. It doesn't matter how great the cause is, because in that moment, your body is ready to give up on you. And there has to be a reason why you get up the next morning and get back into it. And so make sure you're clear on that. And that's okay. Like if your thing is like, I care about geese, girl, go hard for the geese. Don't bring your tail over. Knowing you care about geese, don't bring your tail over here talking about we care about Black trans women. No, beloved, you care about geese. And that's fine. Because you being over there caring about geese and not over here messing around with my people is beneficial. You're not taking up space. You're not making harm. There's no shade in that. Everybody is not meant to advocate for young folks. Everybody's not, that's not everyone's ministry. You can care about it. If you care about it, at minimum, write a check, give us a coin, but your face, your hand, your voice may not need, it doesn't need to be there. It's more harm than helping. So be okay with what your thing is, be clear about it. And the last thing I will say is the why piece for me as a Black leader is that it's helped me figure out when is it time to get out of the way. Because what we should not be doing is replicating the same things these other white queer EDs have done. There's a reason why it took so long for us to get here, because we've waited for these girls to die, to decide to have kids, or just sit their ass down somewhere. So the why allows me to say that why do I want to stay in this job? What is the purpose for me being an ED at Black and Pink, and when is it going to be time for me to go, to make space for someone else to sit into their space to find their things? And that why is my compass. And that's really important. I cannot fathom somebody being an executive director of the same organization for 20 years. This is not a for-profit agency. A nonprofit is owned by the community, by the board. If a board member isn't there for 20 years, why would we have an ED there? And I say that because your DNA gets into the organization. The longer I'm at Black and Pink, everything at Black and Pink will start to resemble Dominique. And so then I will begin to repeat the systems that I want to dismantle. So my why helps me do that. And that would be my advice.
Thank you, Dominique. Kierra, some advice for the angelic troublemakers. Applause for that. I mean, that was dynamic, Dominique.
And it's no shade to the girls who've been in their job for 20 years. I mess with y'all. I don't want to get these emails. I don't want to get these texts, because I'm not holding space for that, because there was no shade intended. I'm just asking why. What are you still doing? So if you call me, I'll be like, if you're still there, let me know what thing I can help you with. Okay. So I don't want nobody emailing, tweeting me, nothing.
You already know. You already got some direct messages. Don't even play. Oh my God, this is so great. I could do this for like another 2 hours. I love y'all. First of all, I love angelic troublemakers so much. Hashtag give me a t-shirt. Number one. My advice is really connected to what Melanie and Dominique said. I think it's important, two things. One is to build a community of people around you that support you, right? Cheerlead for you. But in some ways, I think it's even more important that you have those people to hold you accountable, right? So go make some trouble and be prepared for what the impact might be what you intended, right? You might make some trouble, and then you gotta face the music, right? And so we need leadership, right? Leaders, and I mean that broadly, to not just have a vision and not just be authentic and not just make trouble, but be willing to listen and hear where that impact didn't quite hit the right way, right? We all still have learning to do and growing to do and evolving to do. And it's important to have, like, there's personal responsibility, right? Shoot, I've been ED for three weeks, and I already had to like own my stuff. I already, right, rubbed some folks the wrong way and the wrong, right? I was like, oh, I'll be specific. I am, again, I'm from Georgia. I am really used to and comfortable with talking about our need for the involvement and engagement of faith constituents and communities across faith. And I did not talk about people who were not people of faith in this particular space. And I don't know about it. I'm not particularly religious, but I don't know anything about atheists, right? Like, I don't even know. I was like, well, I don't even know what, do we call them non-believers? Is that okay? Because I don't know. And it's okay that I don't know, right? It's okay that I don't know. And how do I start learning, right? How do I start communicating and engaging in ways, right, that holds, right, those people, right? Okay, so we hit an ouch point. I don't have to beat myself into oblivion, and that's a growth edge for me. And I think that's important that we keep naming those for ourselves, right? And each other, right? And ask you all, right, each other to hold me accountable to this growing edge that I'm trying to get better at. And then finally, I would say, find joy, right? One of my biggest fears is that, take the five of us right here, that in 15 years, we are so run down and beat up and cynical and done that there are other young Black folks who are even interested in taking on these positions because we jacked it up, right? Like I want to live this life and do this work and laugh and dance and sing and, you know what I mean, kiki and learn and, you know, and build more community. And I want people to see me be authentically me and be resilient and find joy and be the mom, right, that I want to be and fuck it up, mess it up, and be okay. And that it's not all gonna fall apart. I want people to see that, and I want people to see, you know, I can be all of this, right? I can have all of these things and I can still show up as a leader. I want to do that. So, yeah.
Thank you for that. David, some advice for the angelic troublemakers out there tonight.
Yeah, in the spirit of Brother Byard, let me acknowledge as a Black feminist just how thankful it is to share space with Black women who are responsible for almost everything good in the world. I associate myself with all of the colleagues, comments of my colleagues, and just really want to say thank you for all that you all do, that which is acknowledged publicly and that which no one other than maybe your partners and Jesus know about. 4 things come to mind quickly, Richard. One is, and they're all framed sort of by acknowledging that white supremacy wins when we fail to show up in our fullness and to show out in the ways in which we are uniquely purposed to do, or when we otherwise hide or shrink or don't do that which we know is required. And so acknowledging that, I want everyone who hears this, acknowledging that it's probably people who are already toiling and doing the work, to take care of yourselves. We often exist in this moment are in a state of an emergency. And so this is the moment when the flight attendant will say, secure your own oxygen mask before attending to anyone else, because we need you to pour from the overflow so that you can be happy, healthy, and whole. The second is to lead with love. I say that with not this sort of Disney phantasmagorical feeling that I want to evoke. This ain't about Elsa, it's about the spirit of Brother Baldwin and Sister Nikki, who talked about love being the thing that would allow us to win. And I want us to honor and acknowledge that. I want us all to commit to thriving. I celebrate the work of Dr. Kierra, who leads our education work, who reminds us that often white supremacy is set up such that we think that we deserve to survive, which is the bare minimum. Beyond surviving, we deserve to thrive, especially in a country that we built and continue to sustain for free. And then the last thing is inspired specifically by what my sister Dominique said, which is that while you are deciding your role in the arena, right? This is an all hands on deck enterprise moment. This is not time for folks to be in the stands offering commentary. So I want you to find your role. Again, if it's the geese, go ahead, do that. Play your position, but I want you to get in the arena. And while you're doing that sincerely, I hope you hear when I say do no harm. There are so many people who are experts in work related to being a race warrior. It's often thankless work. There often aren't platforms like this to be celebrated upon, and that's not necessarily what I'm asking for, what I'm suggesting is necessary. But what I'm saying is that while this work in this moment seems sexy, it is not for the faint of heart. And so for those who are tempted to try and swerve in this lane, I want you to seek to do no harm. And again, I just want to say thank you to Imani and her team for pulling this together.
Thank you, David. I also want to thank Imani and the amazing team at the National Center for Lesbian Rights for pulling this amazing panel together. And I would like to end with her by her giving some jewels of wisdom to the angelic troublemakers who are tuning in this evening.
Y'all, thank you so much for participating in this conversation. Anytime I am on a virtual stage with any of you, I know that I am doing something right. So thank you so much for just your partnership. I think y'all are just honestly the cat's meow. I will say that I love the phrase angelic troublemakers, and I'm gonna keep that one. But what I like about it so much is that we really do need to there needs to be a reframe about what it means to make trouble. And, you know, we definitely have heard that, and more people talk about it with John Lewis, and that being what he says. But we have to remember, this is not, this work is work that sometimes we love, but sometimes it's work because it's what we have to do, you know. And we might, and this isn't what, we have to have a special kind of creative imagination we have to envision a world that we have never seen before, and we have to know that there's a path there, and that's what we're doing. And that said, sometimes there's going to be some making trouble. Sometimes there's going to be something that someone's saying that isn't quite right. But the thing is, what I'm looking at isn't quite right. And so I have this idea of what this world looks like, and it's beautiful. And that is what I'm fighting for every day. And I can see it, and it's clear, and I've never seen it before, but I know what it looks like. And so when I think about these angelic troublemakers, like, I think those are the folks that can see this world as well. You know, I think that there's something out there, and some of us can see that, you know. And the folks around this virtual stage, you know, like, these are the types of people that can see it, you know. And David, I really appreciate what you said. This work isn't for the faint of heart, you know, it's not, but there's room for you in it. There's room. If you think that you have something to give, there's room for you. And the thing is, we have to take care of ourselves, but we also have a responsibility. We have a responsibility to do this work well, to bring other people with us. That is something that we have to do. And it's, you know, it might be, this is a little bit hard. This is expecting stuff, but, you know, this is the work. This is the work. It's getting there, and it's bringing more people with us. And that has to be something that we're doing. And we have to be able to center the most underrepresented of us. We have to do that. And I want to, you know, I also want to take some time, because Black folks, our reputations aren't as flexible as some of our counterparts. And so when we are doing this work, it's going to look different. It is going to look different. And we know that not everyone is always going to hear what we're saying. And if we have a misstep, that's going to be read differently than our white counterparts. And that has to be, we have to know that that's going to happen from time to time. And for those that want to support this leadership, it's to know that we have to require some grace sometime. We require some grace in our leaders. We require some grace in the folks that we work with. Everyone needs some grace sometimes. And when I walk through the world, I try to say that I offer people an ounce more grace than I think they deserve. And I think that's an important part of leadership as well. Y'all, it's been an absolute pleasure and an honor to be on this virtual stage with all of you. Happy Black History Month.
That's what I was going to say. Happy Black History Month. I want to thank David, Kierra, Dominique, Melanie, Alphonso, and I also want to thank the amazing communications team at the National Center for Lesbian Rights and Christopher Vasquez for putting this all on. Thank you guys for joining us at home as well. This is Richard Fowler signing off and saying Happy Black History Month. Take care. See y'all next time.